Hello, and welcome to the Practice Marketing Power Hour, highlighting successful strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. I'm your host, Neil Trickett. I'm the CEO of Practice Promotions, and today we're going to talk about how you can gain profit and freedom in your practice in the coming year. And I'm really happy to welcome Nathan Shields here. He's the founder and coach of PT Owners Club, so you definitely want to check that out. Nathan is a very well-versed business professional. He's actually a physical therapist himself, and he's owned clinics before. During his career, he's owned and grown and sold 4 different PT clinics for over 7 figures. And that journey has led him to launch the PT Owners Club to share his knowledge and wisdom to help other clinics be successful too. So welcome, Nathan. Great to have you on the podcast with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That sounded like an amazing introduction for someone else.
Well, you're an amazing individual, and I've been very fortunate to know Nathan for many, many years. Actually, when he was a practice owner, we worked together and we did some marketing for
Right.
his clinics there. So yeah, and I've been to business trainings with Nathan too. So yeah, we've had a long history of working together, and he's a very smart person and has done a lot of figured a lot of things out along the way, and now is very fortunate to be helping other practice owners scale their businesses with his marketing business knowledge. So
Thanks, man. I appreciate the kind words.
yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that history. Nathan, you've been incredibly successful as a business owner, and so we've talked a lot in our podcast with different specialists out there about how as a practice owner you need to stop seeing yourself necessarily as a practitioner and start treating yourself and seeing yourself as that leader and that business owner. And so for you in your business, like, how did that come about? When did you start to make that mental shift from being a practitioner to that leader?
Wow, that makes me think back to my first years of ownership. So I started my clinic probably about 3 years after I graduated from PT school, and just jumped into it because there was honestly, I jumped into it because I found an open office suite for rent that was in an area of town that was growing, and there weren't any other physical therapists around. So I was like, hey, here's the location, that I can set up without a ton of competition. I always wanted to do it anyways. And my wife was like, okay, I'm signing the lease tomorrow. Are you ready? And I'm like, yeah, no, yeah, I guess maybe. We're doing this no matter how I feel. And started treating patients, started getting busy, marketed on my own, did all that stuff, bootstrapped it all. And I remember even within the first few years thinking, if I'm doing what I'm doing now, 5 to 10 years from now, I'm going to get totally burned out. And the constant refrain as I worked with, or as I talked with family at gatherings and whatnot was, I love treating the patients. I hate working on the business. I mean, if someone could take all the HR stuff off my hands, yada, yada, and I could just treat patients, I'd be so happy. And I honestly just kept my head down and worked that way. I continued to hire and grow, and we were successful. But I really hated the business side of things. And it showed. As I look back on things, I can see there were areas of my practice where I probably lost hundreds of thousands of dollars because I didn't manage it well, and I didn't know how to manage things well. Yet I was still doing fine financially. And I got to a point one time where I just decided, I just can't keep doing this. I was fine financially, but I was in a situation where I have many kids, and during this ownership journey, I would go to bed, or I'd get off work, after 7, maybe get home around 8 or 9, wake up at 4 a.m. to do my notes and take off, get ready for the day, and take off by 6 to get to the clinic for some of the first patients and get things ready and stuff. And I would keep a schedule similar to that, to the point where I would go days without seeing my newborns awake. Like, my wife would tell me all about the things that they did. I'd see my babies in the crib, but otherwise they were asleep and I never saw them awake. And I didn't notice it in the moment, but like on a Thursday, I'd think, I haven't seen my baby awake since Monday because of this schedule. And not only that, but I know a lot of PT owners have experienced the same thing, but I'd go on vacation and it seemed like everything hit the fan
Mhm.
when I was on vacation and calls came out. Like that's when the physicians got upset. And that's
Yeah.
when people quit is when I was gone and the team had to handle it in my absence. Um, I just thought I can't continue like this just sucks. This is not what I signed up for. And I got the opportunity to get some coaching and consulting, and the price tag was high. It was a shocker, but I remember telling my partner Will Humphreys at the time, like, we got to do something. Like this, I can't keep going this way. And this is probably 8 to 10 years into ownership. So I'd been complaining for 5 to 8 of those years about being a business owner, um, not recognizing that what I learned now is once I opened the business, I was no longer a physical therapist that had a clinic. I had become a business owner who just happened to be a physical therapist. And that's a huge mindset shift that, for those who don't quite understand, it's not just a play on words, it's a serious mindset shift. And I didn't understand that I was the thing that was keeping myself back. I was the reason that my schedule was what it was. It wasn't someone else. I wasn't taking control of my life and taking control of my business. And once I got some coaching and consulting to put me in that place to take admin time to work on my business, pull myself out of patient care, that's when finally the mindset started shifting and things started clicking. That's when my business started running better. That's when I took control of my schedule and had time for my kids, and um, got to a point where I no longer really wanted to see patients. To that point, like I found a lot more fulfillment, honestly, in business ownership and in leading a team and coaching my team and building systems. Well, no one can say they have fun building systems. Well, I guess some people can, but I didn't. Nonetheless, like implementing policies and procedures, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
getting some structure in place. Let's have a little bit of structure. Let's have some meetings that are impactful and important. And that's when I started really recognizing what I wish I had known 15 years earlier,
Mhm.
and that is that I have to act as the owner. I have to act as a business leader, in spite of my ignorance, in spite of my naivete, without having any training. Once I am the owner, I'm the owner first, and I'm a physical therapist second. And it took a long time to recognize that.
Yeah. And I went through a very similar journey myself, right, in practice ownership, and that. And I think that's how most of us start out, right? We have these great aspirations. We're going to build an amazing business. We usually are coming from a place that we want to do something differently, right, than where we've been working, that we can do it better than where we were working, right? And so we come in with that aspiration, but we don't really have necessarily the know-how of the business aspect of it, right? We may be a very good clinician, right, and continue to focus on improving our clinical skills, but we don't necessarily put much time into the nuances of learning the business skills. And
Yeah.
a lot of times it's school of hard knocks as you go through.
Yeah. And it was a lot easier to just complain about it instead of take responsibility for it and actually learn some of the business stuff. At that time, I think I turned to what I might have thought was around me in terms of the community. I hired a business coach, but that didn't get me far initially. Looking back, he didn't. I don't really remember much. He did a SWOT analysis with me once, and that was about it. Um, but I think I just didn't know where to turn. And
Mhm.
that's one of the reasons why I started my podcast. Is because I kind of felt like I was on an island and I had to figure this all out by myself, not knowing that there were business networks out there. The APTA didn't have the peer-to-peer network. there weren't the abundance of physical therapy business coaches as there are now. Coaching is pretty ubiquitous now, whereas I don't think it was in the early 2000s, you know? So I needless to say, I felt more comfortable complaining about it than I did about actually finding a solution. Yeah. And so that can't be the excuse for many people out there now. There's plenty of podcasts and books and coaches and
Yeah.
resources galore for PT owners out there that don't know exactly where to turn and what to do next.
Yeah. Now you've consulted and coached a lot of different practice owners of all, businesses of all sizes there in your years. I'm just kind of curious, do you see this with people that make that leap and start to be extremely successful, that it starts with the individual first in their own mindset shift? Because you can learn business skills and you can, YouTube marketing, you can YouTube hiring and recruiting stuff, right? But until you actually kind of own that yourself, like, hey, I can't be a full-time practitioner, right? And I need to, you can still, to me, it's like you can still enjoy that, right? If that's something that you really have a passion for, is, continue to help patients, practice with patients, but you have to wear your business hat. So just kind of curious if that's something that you've seen a lot in clinic owners.
I would say that so I do a podcast as well, right? The Physical Therapy Owners Club. And I interview, just like you do, a lot of successful PT owners. And I would say 99.5% of the people that I interview at some point have gotten some coaching or consulting. And it's usually the typical story is someone opens up a clinic and all hell breaks loose. The world starts falling apart around them and they have a hard time dealing with it, to the point of potential divorces and all that kind of stuff. And it's very common, but and then they finally turn to getting coaching, right? And they can see that as the flexion point in their business where it makes a significant change. And I highlight that only because, yeah, there are plenty of books and there are plenty of podcasts out there, and you will make progress if you leverage those and the knowledge that's in those and implement those. That's being the important part, because I know plenty of people that have listened to all the podcasts and read all the books, and their business isn't any different than it was 5 years ago. And they're still complaining about the same things. So implementing is an important thing. But a majority of people out there, they don't know. I don't know how the phrasing goes, but you can't see the picture when you're in it, kind of thing. Like, they don't know what's happening in their business because they're in the middle of it. And that's where the importance of having a coach and a third party comes in, I think, and says, okay, I can see where you're at, and I can see what you're working on. And honestly, that's a distraction. You actually need to be focused over here.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful. That's what changed my business experience, my professional life, my life. Honestly, I've had a coach ever since I hired that first coach. I've had a coach in business and life ever since, for years.
Yeah, I agree too. For me, it's been, kind of looking back on it here, it's like, I think if you look at business and you're as you own a business, right, it's a journey, and you can't expect to figure everything out right away. So just, hey, I'm going to get, a coach, I'm going to start implementing all these skills, and then it's going to be all fixed. Like, that's not how it works, right? It's a journey. Like, it takes time, it takes repetition, it takes failure on different things. And you need to have that guide that helps you along the way. And I've definitely found in my journey, like, I've gone through layers of business coaches and different types of consulting businesses. And one thing that I've learned is that the bigger that you get, the more consultants that you need, because you can't be an expert in everything, right? So you need to have consultants in, hiring and recruiting and logistics and marketing and operations and, financial, so there's, the complexity of the business increases exponentially as the business grows. And so if you try to be the master of everything, you become the bottleneck in your business. And I've definitely seen that. And I noticed like you get to a certain level, then all of a sudden it's plateauing and you're like, oh, I'm becoming the bottleneck again, right? I need to like go to that next level and change things up again. And so it's been for me, retrospect, kind of looking at that, it's been an interesting journey along the way. So that's one of my things that I would say to people out there is that it's no matter what level that you're at, it's a journey, and you're going to figure out, and you're going to need some guides to help you get to that next, level that you want to get to.
Yeah, I'm at a point now in my business experience and in life where I'd rather pay the third party to do it instead of figuring it out myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm for example, I'm building an online course for PT owners right now, and I remember interviewing different consultants. So number one, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to get a coach because I'd never done this before, right? So I'm looking at particular consultants, and I started interviewing a few of them. And one of them, I remember distinctly saying, well, you're going to need to, I'll teach you how to do this and the design and this. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. That's why I'm talking. I want you to do it.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't think that's out there. I'm like, it's 2023. I'm pretty sure there's someone out there that's going to do this for me. I don't want to stay up till midnight learning the software program. I don't want to figure out how to do blank. I'm more than happy to provide you the content, and then the third party is going to do the rest of it. I'm sorry, I'm not technically savvy like that. And so that's even if it's not a coach or consultant, you brought up a good point. I'm ready to hire the experts. Mm-hmm. Right. And get that. And
I learned something, not too long back here, and I thought it was very, very awesome phrase. And it comes back to, your biblical stories, right? Which is, if you teach a man, to fish, he's going to be able to fish for himself. Right. But in business, it's like, at some point, do you want to learn how to fish, or you just want to have someone give you the fish? Right. So like you said, there's some parts where it's like, I don't want to learn how to fish for this because it's going to take me some work. Just give me the damn fish, right? That's what I want to have, right? So I think
I've got the money to pay for the fish, so I'll just get it now. Thanks.
Right, just give me the fish.
And I want to give it. That is Confucius, I think, that said that instead of the Bible. I want to make sure he gets his due.
Yeah. So Nathan here, as we're starting to look ahead, for on the podcast here, we're looking at 2024, but whatever year it is ahead there, it's time to start thinking about next year, right? And start thinking about, okay, where are we going to go here? What we're going to do? How are we going to, capture the flag here? And so for a lot of practice owners out there, they talk, they say something on the lines of, I'm working really hard, but after all the little things that go into the business, my profits seem lower than they should be. And we know that there's a lot of financial challenges out there. So, if your practice isn't giving you the freedom and profitability you want, what do you see needs to change first?
Yeah, the default for most people is like, I need more new patients, right? And I remember one of my coaches back in the day, and I'm sorry if I allude to coaching all the time, but it's played an impact on my life. You can obviously tell. But I remember him making the analogy to, we can get you a bunch of new patients, right? There's a lot of ways to do that. And we use practice promotions, and we had our own marketing strategies, et cetera. But isn't that like filling up a bucket full of holes? Like, we can add a ton of water to this bucket, but with a lack of systems in place, then they're just flooding out. I mean, you're not retaining these patients. Yeah. And in order to fill those holes, it's got to be a multi-system approach, right? To maximize profits off of every new patient. And it's not just one department. You've got to have a strong marketing strategy, sure. But I just did a podcast interview yesterday where we talked about conversions. Your marketing strategies could be great, but if your front desk person doesn't know how to take that fax referral and call them, well, my partner recommended, or in his clinics, they have to call that patient within an hour. He's like, we envision like calling that patient as they're walking out of the doctor's office, hopefully, right? But call them within their hours, their policy. or a patient calls to set up an appointment, or simply calling to get information. If they're not using that phone call to schedule an appointment and get them on the books and get them in the door, then there's a poor conversion ratio, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's one. You could have the best marketing strategy in the world and you could lose it right there at the front desk. So how strong is your front desk at converting, right? And this is partly why I decided to create my online course. And I know I'm not on here to promote this, but it just happens to play into the same thing. And the idea behind it is, okay, are you collecting everything you can at the time of service,
Mm-hmm.
right? That includes co-insurances and estimated deductibles for that day.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just let those slide and collect those later. You collect them at the date of service by estimating. Right?
Cash is king, right? We got to make sure we get paid every dollar that we're should be owed from our service.
Yeah. McKinsey and consultants did a study and found that every dollar not collected at the time of service leads to your collections end up being about 50 to 75% of the patient's balance.
Wow.
So you're losing 25 to 50 cents of every dollar if you're not collecting on the day of service, which is huge. Because most
huge.
clinics probably 15 to 25%, maybe 10 to 20% of their overall revenues are patient payments at time of service, copays, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I'd say at least, yeah. I mean,
at
today's
least,
world, like you have high deductible plans. I mean, people got to pay mostly out of pocket.
Right. So if you're not collecting at time of service, yeah, you're losing money. Do you know your financial metrics? Jeez, I know that. I love the adage, when performance is measured, performance improves. When performance is measured and reported, performance improves exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
So are you tracking your financial stats, right? And we're not just talking, we are talking average reimbursement rate, right? What is your projected collections versus your actual collections? What are you tracking your accounts receivables and making sure that they're in an acceptable ratio between 0 to 60 days and 60 to 90, 90, 120, 120 and above, et cetera, et cetera. Are you meeting with your CPA on a monthly basis? Then how are you holding your billing and collections team accountable? And do you know how to do that? Are you tracking their KPIs? Are you meeting with them regularly? Are your providers, if you've got more than just yourself, but even if it's just yourself, are you billing everybody according to Medicare guidelines? Because you don't have to, and you probably shouldn't if you want to maximize your reimbursements. I mean, there are AMA guidelines that the commercial insurances follow, and you don't have to follow the 8-minute rule. Do your providers know that? Do you know that? All these things play in. That's why I say it's a multi-system approach. If you're going to maximize your profits and jack up your average reimbursement rate per visit, it starts there before I start talking a whole lot about your new patients. Continue your marketing efforts. Don't stop doing those. Heaven forbid, don't stop. Keep those consistent as possible. But let's start looking at some of your systems, and are they clean? Are they clear? And then we can start, honestly, after that point, then I'll talk to you about dropping low paying insurances, but not until we get some of this other stuff cleaned up first.
Yeah. I remember having a conversation with every therapist that worked for me, and it was always, you could always see it in their face. Like they would be so shocked when you showed them how much it costs per patient to run the practice.
Oh yeah.
And they were like, what? Right. So yeah, by the time I pay your salary and the front desk salary and the billing salary and the rent and like equipment and like all these kind of things, right? Like they're not thinking with that, right? But if they have some knowledge and underlying experience, like, hey, this is what it actually cost us to treat a patient. So we need to be able to make much more than that, right? In order to have opportunities. You want a salary raise, or front desk wants a salary raise. You want to have opportunities to help more people. So I think you can have an honest discussion with your providers and keep them in some sort of financial understanding. Now they don't need to know all the ins and outs and details because that's not their thing. But if they have some understanding, they can get behind, like, why are we looking at billing codes and why are we looking at, like you said, the timing of certain, insurances and coding that way, right? So they can get behind you with that. They're looking out for the practice's best interest and the patient's best interest, of course. But
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, it makes so much sense where you have to get your systems in place. You have to look at marketing, you have to look at operations, you have to look at finance. And where I see practice owners struggle is that we can be helping them a ton with their marketing. They be getting a bunch of new patients, but they're leaking out the front desk, or they're dropping off after 2 or 3 visits
Right.
because some of the patient experience internally is not there, or there's
Mhm.
issues with the way that the finance has been handled, and the patient has a misunderstanding of what they owe, and there's all kinds of variables there. But the tighter that control is internally, the more successful you can be. The profitability goes exponentially up for that.
Yeah, and when I'm talking about all these systems that you need to assess and review and make sure procedure is in place, you can't do that if you're treating full time.
Right.
How do you stay on top of that? How do you create it in the first place? I mean, you could, but what kind of life is that, right? So that's why it's imperative to have some admin time for the owner to work on specifically these things. There's so much to consider and so much to look at, but it starts with just focus on one area and going from there. And I experienced the same thing that you did. I had a PTA that was with me for a dozen years, and she got to a point where she ended up being a VP of marketing, and we showed her the P&Ls, the profit and loss statements from the previous months for all of our clinics, and she's like, "You lost money? What? I thought you guys what?" I'm like, "Yeah, we probably lose money per month." Sometimes you have those months where there's 3 payrolls instead of 2, and so you'll
Yeah.
lose cash on those, and that'll happen a couple times a year, or maybe your January or February because of deductibles and stuff, you'll lose money. And she was just blown away. She thought I was just raking in millions every year on the back of these oppressed employees.
Yeah.
And then she found out that I actually lost money a couple months a year. She's like, "What are you?" Her total mindset shifted. She's
Mhm.
like, "I can't believe you're okay with that." I'm like, "I'm not okay with it." It's just, that's why I keep telling you guys, I need you to make sure you're billing appropriately and pushing for more patients.
Yeah.
Now you see where I'm coming from. She's like, "Yeah, okay, now I get it. Why
Yeah.
didn't you tell me this 10 years ago?"
Our finance director is awesome. She plays games, and so we'll have a company conference a couple times a year where everybody's together, and she'll play a money game, right? So one year I remember, again, this is eye opening to the staff, right? Is that you line them all up. We had some like fake dollar bills, right, or even real dollars. I can't remember what we had, but we lined everybody up. We gave them a certain amount of dollars each person, right? And then, okay, you're all the income that's coming into the business, right? And then they would go, okay, this is these are salaries. It takes half of the money away from half the people, and okay, this is
Right.
what we pay for insurance. So this is what we're paying for this. And so, by the time they were done with, like, if you had 20 staff and they were down to like 2 or 3 staff, that's your profit. And so it brings reality to the staff of like, hey, we're not raking it in here, right? There's a lot of expenses that you just don't see.
Mhm.
And so, the way for us to improve those margins is how well we can have these systems and work together internally.
Yeah, I love it.
And so when you're coaching different practice owners here, and maybe initially they come to you and say, I feel trapped in my business, or what can I do about feeling that feeling being trapped in my business? What are some of the things that you kind of try to guide them towards?
Yeah, we talked about this recently on a podcast episode as well, about people feeling stuck, right? Just don't know where to go. And I think an owner in that situation doesn't recognize that they are stuck because they don't know what they want. Like, if someone's really clear about what they want, then the the next steps start falling into place. If they
Confused
know
mind does
exactly
nothing, right?
what's that.
A confused mind does nothing.
Right. And I've seen this with clients that I've coached who are like, I'm like, what do you, he's like, I remember someone being really hesitant to hire on a PT. I was like, well, I'm encouraging you to hire this PT because I'm assuming, based on the goals that we set before, that's what you want. Is that what you want? It's like, I don't know. And I don't know if it was fear that was maybe, that's always a huge investment, right? To bring on a PT, the salary commitment, et cetera. The fear that comes along with that, maybe blocking some of that. But getting clear about what you really, really want and what your purpose is as a business owner, as a business, you name it. What is your purpose? Where do you want to go? What's your vision? And if you're not clear on that, then it doesn't matter what you do next. You could do whatever you want. But if your goal is to treat 40 hours a week and not work on the business, then it's pretty clear that you need to start moving towards hiring an office manager that handles all the administrative stuff. And you better learn how to manage that office manager, because you're still the owner, right?
Yeah.
But you can be an owner and treat 40 hours a week, but you better find someone to do all the business stuff for you. And that's a lot, right?
I would have to argue too that like I think that's just not a reality. You can have
I
someone
don't, I
handle a
wouldn't,
lot of things, but you're the boss, right?
I would
The
never
buck
recommend
stops
somebody
with
do
you.
that.
And if you want to just treat patients, then maybe owning a practice is not for you. Maybe you better work for someone else.
Right. Maybe you should just be a team therapist on another team.
Yeah.
Right. Uh, but if you love treating, okay, you can't neglect your ownership and leadership responsibilities. Yeah, cut down to 20 hours a week of treating so that the team has a leader to look up to. I mean, who do they look up to if you're just head down treating patients all the time? They know that you're not doing the stuff you're supposed to be doing. They know that you're ignoring and hiding from what your responsibilities truly are. And they would love some leadership. They would love someone to stand up at the front and tell them where they're going and lead the boat and say, this is why you're here. This is why I hired you. This is where we're going. And this is how we're going to get there. Are you with me or not? They want that kind of leadership, right?
Mhm. I think too for people just because some people feel like, oh, you have to be born a leader, right? And you don't. Like, it's a skill. And I think if you look at yourself like, okay, if you're a great physical therapist, that didn't just happen when you started school, right? That
Right.
took years for you to get to that level where you can be an awesome clinician, right?
Yeah.
And just and what's interesting is when you're an awesome clinician and you have all that experience and knowledge, people just look at you and say, God, you make it look so easy.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing can happen in your business and leadership journey, is that it takes a lot of skill and repetition and learning and experience. And so where you are, today and where you're going to be next year's is not where it's going to be totally different when you're 5 years down the road. You're going to be
Right.
making it look a lot easier because you have all those lessons that you've learned across that time.
Definitely. I agree.
And so as we're looking ahead to next year um, for PT owners and practice owners out there, how do you help coach people towards realistic goals? Because sometimes we can have crazy goals, or sometimes we can really undershoot our goals. So, do you have a way that you help coach people towards making realistic goals? What they should be looking at?
Yeah. I would, I like helping them come up with goals. It's not hard, right? To come up with goals. What are some personal and professional goals? Where do you want imagine where you are 12 months from now if we're having the same conversation. What has to be true to consider this business a success, right? I think it's a famous Dan Sullivan question exercise where you just say, okay, say we're here, what's today, October 26th of 23, it's October 26th of 24. And what has to be true for you to look back and say, this was a super successful year, right? And so it's an easy way to get the thoughts churning, and they'll just say, well, I want to be happy where I'm at, and I want my clinic to be happy and my family be happy. Well, no, you have to have like some specific, let's get like down and dirty. How many patients are you seeing? What are your revenues? What does your life look like? Are you treating 40 hours a week? And if you're not, what are you doing with the other time? Are you spending more time in your hobbies? Right? Are you spending more time with your family? Are you doing things you love? Have you gone on a couple of vacations? Let's plan some of that stuff into place, right? And what I find usually as I go through this exercise, and maybe you've seen the same thing, Neil, is the people create comfortable goals. These are things where I think we can get there if we do it. If I don't have to change too much, but I can push a little bit harder in the things that I currently know how to do. and then I will get to that next level, right? Or that level that I want to get to. And so I would honestly change your question just a little bit. I wouldn't use the word realistic. I would say, what are some uncomfortable goals that we can get to,
Okay.
right? And I say that because I recently read 10x is easier than 2x.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to get to 10x, is the theory is, if you want to get to 10x, you have to completely change your thought processes to focus on the things that make you the most money. Well, yeah. 2x, when we're in a 2x mindset, it's like, well, if I just double my efforts, I should get 2x more, right? And you can, maybe, but who wants to, if it takes just as much effort to get 10x, if you're going to double your efforts, well, let's 10x it instead of 2x it. And that way you can actually see a significant change in your life and in your business. So I like to use more, I like to make my clients a little bit more, I want them to press the edges a little bit. I don't want you to just have a 10% increase next year. I mean, you could probably trip and fall and get a 10% increase if you just, had a little bit more focus. But I want you to do more. So what would have to be, what numbers would we have to consider to make you uncomfortable? Now let's start talking about those, right? And how can we get there? And what are some of the things that you need to get off of your plate and hand over to the experts or other people in your organization who would love to do that for you, so that you don't have to, so you can focus, so you can do the things that you love to do. And just really quickly, it's a long answer to your question, but I had a client who super successful. I mean, she's just got one clinic, but she's got like 10 providers in her clinic, and she's expanding to another clinic, and she's essentially treating full time, like 30 hours a week. And she's been there. She started it, so she's got a huge foothold in the community, and patients want to see her. And if there's a high profile individual in the community, the bank owner or a physician, surgeon, she's going to see them. No one else in the team is going to see them, right? And this is kind of her doing. She's put this on herself. And she said, you know what? I had the opportunity to go golfing. She's a great golfer, and went to the men's league, or it's not a men's league, but it's just the Wednesday night league, right? And went golfing. And like half the people there were previous patients, and asking her all about, this is what you need, or this is my problem. What do you think? This is my problem. So like it was a marketing affair.
Yeah.
And like, what would your life be like if, let's say, you only treated 10 or 15 hours a week, and you golfed every week, maybe a couple times a week. She wants to get into pickleball, small community. She's probably going to have a quarter of those people who are patients. And guess what? They get injured too. And she loves CrossFit. Well, that's like the money pot.
Yeah.
So of injuries, right?
Yeah.
So what if you spent 15 hours a week playing golf, pickleball, and CrossFit as marketing efforts, right? You're there to have fun and all that, but I mean, you're going to send people to the clinics, right? She's like, yeah, heck yeah. Dude, what would your life be like then? She's like, that'd be a dream. I'm like, okay, why aren't we there? You're the owner. You can control your schedule. You can do whatever you want with your business. Go down to 10 hours a week now and start doing all those things. I mean, your dream is up to you. You just need to make the decision and implement it, and tell your team, this is my schedule, and go. So, and that's scary for her, but she didn't recognize that it was right there in front of her. She was the limiting factor. She was the stumbling block to it.
Yeah. I think you
Right.
probably see that too in clinics, is that, and kind of starting out, the practice owner tends to be, the go-to person, right? And then you get some other providers on, and then, after a while, it's sort of like, it's hard to get out of patient care because everybody wants to see you, right?
Everyone goes through that. Yep.
One trick that I did, and maybe some other, practice owners are doing this, but one trick I did with that is that, that VIP or someone that wanted to see me, they would come in the clinic, they would technically be on my schedule, but I'd also have the real treating therapist there. And so just, I would be there for 10, 15 minutes of the initial eval with them, and like, hey, introducing, the Jane, here's your other therapist, Jane, and we're going to work together on you here. And, you know, uh, as we're looking together at the patient for the first 10 minutes and talking, right, I would just be basically, well, Jane, what do you think? Right. And just kind of build up the expertise, the authority of that other therapist. And then it would be like, oh, Jane's totally, got this. The trust factor was already way high with the patient, and you just leave. Right. And then boom,
Yep.
they're off, they're happy. It's
Love it.
just that first time of a patient coming in, they're like, oh, I'm so comfortable, used to seeing Neil. I don't want to see anybody else. Well, that's fine. Let's see them together. And then you'll be very comfortable with Jane. And I'll be checking in on you. Don't worry. And that kind of does, because I'd always be
Yeah,
around.
I love it. The other thing that I've seen people do is where they'd say you limit limit your treating hours so much that they're not willing to change their schedule to meet yours.
Right.
So Nathan sees patients Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 to noon,
Yeah.
right? And they're like, oh, well, I'm not available those times. Okay, well, I've got some other amazing therapists that can help you out in those times. And so that makes it really simple.
Yeah.
Because but that goes to a point. What do most owners do? They'll sacrifice their personal schedule. They'll sacrifice their family to get one more patient in after hours
Mhm.
that they have a relationship. It's both a blessing and a curse. We have so much empathy and compassion. We know they need our help, and we have the skill set to do it, and we want to help them. But people leverage that against us at the sacrifice of our personal mental health and well-being, leverage against our family's time and the time we get to spend with them. Honestly, our hobbies get sacrificed. And until the therapist, well, the owner, who happens to be a therapist, recognizes that they are in control of their schedule and they can't be at effect of other people's schedules, then they start actually taking control and start seeing benefits in their business, and the patients, they'll get the care that they need. I mean,
Mhm.
you've got amazing teams, and honestly, there's other physical therapists out there in the community. You don't want them to go see them, but at some point you got to take control.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as we're talking about those other teams there, how do you work with practice owners to train their teams so their teams are taking more responsibility and being more proactive in their particular roles, which frees up the time of the owner?
Yeah, well, I think you have to learn how to become a coach yourself to your team, right? And as I'm coaching, for me personally, I'm going to ask the PT owner to start measuring specific key performance indicators, KPIs, and we're going to track these stats. These are important stats. I I track them because I think they're the cardinal stats, and they tell me the health of your clinic. Well, you have to determine what those key stats are for the people that you're overseeing, right? And help them understand what those stats are and what those stats mean and how those stats help us fulfill the purpose of the organization. These aren't stats just to collect stats and measure. They're stats that when we fulfill them, we know that the purpose of the organization is fulfilled. And so making those connections, helping them track their stats, coaching them and training them on how to improve their stats, right? And then also training them on this is what it means to be a member of this organization. We have these specific values that are written, iterated, and reiterated time and time again in our meetings, et cetera. And these are our values. Back in the day, ours were professionalism, accountability, growth, and empathy. And this is how we live those out. And, uh, and so we talk about those. We talk about the KPIs. We'd have regular meetings, not super frequent, but we had meetings to assess how they're doing and questions that they might have and how they can do better. And if they're falling short on any of the values, this is where I've seen that. And this is where I think you can do better. Or if they exemplify the values, do the same. That was super professional. I appreciate your accountability. I really see you growing according to whatever values you have. So it takes some coaching, and that takes a little bit of structure. And most people don't know how to innately develop that structure unless they get some kind of guidance or coaching, right? And so they are in the books. I always appreciated Traction by Gino Wickman. That's a really good one, right? And there's others out there, but that's an example of how you can put some structure into your organization. And you have to do the same as you're teaching and training your teams.
Yeah. I was in a conference recently, business conference, and they were talking, and it made it so much. It's a great analogy. It's a great way to kind of explain it. But like a computer has an operating system like Windows or Mac OS, right? And so we kind of think back to Windows 2000, right, as your operating system. Well, that could only do so much, and then you had to upgrade to like Windows XP finally, and now we're at like whatever Microsoft version there is now. But basically, your operating system of your business needs to modify and change in order for you to be able to go to that next level. So if you're a small practice, you a lot of times just need to get an operating system in there, right? And your different systems and things that are happening. And then if you're an established business, a certain number of providers, maybe multiple locations, you have some systems in place, but are the tracking of those systems and the way that you're looking at things or using those systems and metrics, is the operating system of the business at the level it needs to be to go to that next level? And usually you have to upgrade your operating system in order to go to that next level. So I love that analogy. It made a total sense, because I've seen that in my journey in business, is that every time, like, you have to put some effort into modifying and improving your operating system in order to be able to make that leap into the next level.
Yeah. And for those who are listening, make sure you understand when we're talking operating system, that's your policy and procedures manual.
Right.
That's the analogy he's making there. Because I know exactly what you're talking about. Because if you're a single provider, maybe with one front desk, your policy and procedure manual has to do with how to manage the front desk and essentially the new patient paperwork and how we bring patients back and then marketing is another policy and procedure manual, right? But as soon as you start expanding, well, now you need a job description for another physical therapist or physical therapy assistant if you bring them on board. Yeah, you need a different operating system when you bring on a tech, or this is how we use the EMRs. This is how we collect copays. That's all in the policy and procedures manual. That's your operating system as either third-party softwares or EMRs start captivating or capturing credit cards so you can keep them on file. That's an upgrade to the operating system, right? I wasn't able to do that 10 years ago. So now we got to get a new operating system to modify for a situation like that. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah, and it doesn't come easy, man. That's the grind. That's the grind of business ownership. It was well spelled out in E-Myth Revisited, right? That's the story of the entrepreneur in spite of the industry, right? It's to write down your operating systems, get those in place so that everything that's in your head, what you want to see in your business, is in writing, so other people can recreate that over and over and over again when you're not there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be, it doesn't have to be so arduous. Really have to have super fine detail things. Like, the team has to work on it together. And I saw something recently was pretty fascinating, but they were using AI to create the standard operating procedures for different positions. So what they would do is basically, whoever was, let's say front desk scheduling, how they did it, for example, they would take a little screenshot video, right, with a certain software that can then transcribe it, take the transcription, put it through Chat GPT, make it a little cleaner and easier to kind of like operate. So before you know it, was kind of a few iterations, but probably within about 10-15 minutes, they had something that was all typed up, ready to go. Boom. To go. So there's all kinds of tricks, but the main thing is get that knowledge down on paper so someone else can train on it and do it.
Yeah. And it's great. You mentioned video. The training could be watching the video.
Right.
Right. I mean, absolutely. If it's easier for people to just do a screen share, use Loom and screen share and said, okay, this is how we collect a payment. Go into the EMR, go here. I mean, that's probably already there in the EMR trainings, but people don't do the EMR trainings. I mean, I can't tell you how many EMR owners that I've talked to, and they say our issues at customer service usually have to deal with the owners that take on the EMRs, do the change, and then don't watch any of the trainings. Like, if you just watch the trainings, you would know how to handle this particular situation. That's where you, as the owner, in your company, you're going to say, I'm going to give you the time. You're going to do the trainings, whether they're mine or the EMRs, so that you know where the answers are. And when you come to me with a question, when you come to me with a question, my first response is going to be, what does it say in the policy and procedures? And like, I don't know. This is when we really started getting serious about our policy and procedures manuals, and people started following them. Is I would respond with that. What does it say in the policy and procedure? I want some time off in October because my family's coming into town. What does the policy and procedure manual say? They're like, I don't know. I'm like, all right, check it out. If it doesn't have the answer, let me know. And then they'd say, and then I wouldn't hear from them. I'm like, what did it say? Well, it said to fill out this form and turn it into my supervisor. Oh, okay. Did you do it? They're like, yeah. All right, cool. And then sometimes they're like, it doesn't say anything. Rarely did they come in and say, hey, what do I do about this? And I'd say, what does it say in the policy and procedure manual? Or I already looked and it doesn't say anything about that. Rarely did they ever say that. But I would love it if they had.
Yeah.
I would welcome that. I would have paid them $10 on the $20 on the spot for inflation to give me that kind of answer, so I know where the holes in my policy and procedure manual were, so I could create a new policy. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's how you get it to be alive and working in your business. You've got to push it into the business. They won't just readily sit by and do trainings like that.
Yeah. So Nathan, we've covered a ton of great information today. Do you have any final words of advice for our listeners out there?
Oh man, I've talked a lot already, and I'm sorry I've taken up a lot of time. Hopefully it's been valuable. Great. But yeah, if people like listening to podcasts, consume podcasts. But if you're not taking snippets of value from each podcast and putting it on your calendar to work on something in your business and really being focused, then it's not worth it. And sometimes you can get overwhelmed. There's a lot of things you want to do, but just take one or two things and make it work. If you find a book that you want to implement some of those programs, stay on that book for months until what it has recommended has been implemented into the business. Mm-hmm. And if you're not sure where to start, get a coach, get a consultant. I've already beat that one to death, but we're looking. The reason why you do this, Neil, and why you started your business is because physical therapy owners need help. Mm-hmm. They really do. We've taken it in the shorts for too long, and reimbursement plus inflation have led to a real squeeze on our profits. We need to become, PT owners in general need to become the best business owners if they want to survive. And I think that those PT owners who are currently surviving and succeeding as PT owners are some of the best business owners out there. They could take that knowledge to any industry. I think you've probably seen this as well. They could take that knowledge to any industry and thrive. Mm-hmm. Because what you see in other industries, the profit margins are such that they don't have to know as much as we do. So you come in with that knowledge, you can do great things. So yeah, I would just encourage PT owners to not be passive, take control, get some guidance, and work on your business. Recognize that you're a business owner first.
Awesome. Great stuff, Nathan. Thank you so much. And for our listeners out there, what's the best way to get more from you? Is it PTOclub.com for the PT Owners Club? Definitely check that out for Nathan. Nathan also is doing coaching and consulting for practices of all different sizes. So can they go through the PT Owners Club to reach out to you there? Or is that a different?
Yeah, you can actually set up an appointment with me and my partner, Adam Robin, through PTOclub.com. If you want to email me directly with a question, nathan@ptoclub.com. Really easy. And the Physical Therapy Owners Club podcast, just like yours, it's on all the iTunes and Stitchers and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, make sure that you subscribe to that. Check PTOclub.com. Great stuff there. Nathan always has a ton of great insight there. And if you haven't worked with him before, I definitely encourage you to have a conversation and see if working with Nathan would be right for your business. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our Practice Promotions YouTube channel for more podcast episodes like this one, and also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Ton more weekly business marketing tips that we're putting out there for you. So this is Neil Trickett with Practice Marketing Power Hour. We're signing off here, but I want to say here's to your success. Thank you, Nathan.
Thanks again for joining us today. Be sure to check out practicepromotions.net/power. There, listeners can download over 9 checklists and free resources made to coach you through simple, proven marketing actions to increase new patients. So check it out today. That's practicepromotions.net/power, and I'll see you next time.